Right, Mel, Priya, shall we get cracking?
Absolutely.
So welcome everyone. I'm going to say good morning and good afternoon because Priya is joining us from Canada and Mel is joining us from Towcester in Buckinghamshire and I'm in Milton Keynes. So we're all over the place today and hopefully you are too. But we're really excited to be here. I don't think there's a more important topic to talk about really. So today it's going to be all about creating a more inclusive culture jointly hosted by WorkBuzz and a leader like me. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to record the webinar today, so a copy will be emailed to you after. So if you miss anything, you'll be able to listen back. And if you've got any questions throughout the session, then feel free to use the Q&A button at the top or bottom of your screen, or you can also email hello@workbuzz.com and my lovely colleague Rebecca will be there to answer any of those questions as well. The most important thing, my job today, is to try and keep us time. And it's a topic that Priya, Mel and myself are really passionate about. So I think that's going to be the hardest job of today. But we're going to hopefully bring some really good perspectives, best practices and stories to share with you. Just a little bit about WorkBuzz and a leader like me. So WorkBuzz, we like to think of ourselves as HR's secret weapon. We help you gather real-time feedback from your people, track the employee experience and make informed data-driven people decisions to improve your culture. So myself and Mel are from WorkBuzz. We're really excited to be here today, but also to be joined by Priya, who has co-founded an organisation called A Leader Like Me. And they're doing some amazingly inspiring work around diversity, underrepresented women, and all sorts of really exciting kind of support networks and communities. And if you click on the link to their website, you can find out a lot more on there as well. And Priya will bring that to life towards the end of the webinar as well. But really, equality, inclusion, diversity and belonging has never been more important. I think it's been thrust to the front of so many conversations and has become an absolute business priority, especially in the last 18 months, 2 years. Employers are rapidly putting in place strategies, but often what we're hearing is that it's sometimes knowing where to start. So really today we're here to provide a really practical 4-step model to help you build an inclusive culture, and really excited to be joined by Priya, who brings so much experience to this, and also Mel, who's head of customer success at WorkBuzz, who has an absolute passion for this in working with the organisations at WorkBuzz as well. So rather than me steal the thunder, Mel, do you just want to talk a little bit about yourself, your background, and almost kind of why you have such a passion for EDIB?
Sure, thanks Dawn, absolutely. As Dawn said, I'm another fellow WorkBuzzer and I'm responsible for customer success here at WorkBuzz. So I've been working with some of our largest clients over the years, but I'm responsible for all our clients and making sure that you're ultimately delighted with the services that we offer. But my background has very much come in a professional sense in engagement and communications. My strengths are around very much individualization, and that's something that I really believe is ingrained in me. As you may be able to tell, whilst we're using my shortened name Mel, Melisan is quite a unique name, and I actually have a heritage which is mixed. So my mum is Chinese from Malaysia, and she moved over here when she was 18, and my dad is from London from more of a Jewish heritage. They met in sunny Banbury, so actually down the road from where I am now, and settled down to have children in Luton, which anybody that's based in the UK, Luton is not London, let's start there. But if you've ever visited Luton, it is a cultural hot pot. So by growing up with parents that had different backgrounds and in a place like Luton, I've really learned how important things like individualization are. And for me, that's kind of just grown through my career and has really led me into roles around communicating and engaging and really being passionate about everybody bringing their whole selves to work, because no two people are alike. So I think that's a summary from me.
Priya, how about you?
Well, I grew up, I was born in Mumbai, India, but I came to Canada when I was 3 years old and have grown up in a very multicultural city, Toronto, very close to Toronto. And, you know, it's been interesting when we started, so I've been in internal communication for almost 30 years now, internal communication, employee engagement, change management. And I actually met Advita Patel through that process. She followed me on Twitter and LinkedIn, and then we got a chance to meet at the IABC conference in Vancouver in Canada in 2019. And we have literally met for 20 minutes in our lives.
Forever.
Face to face, ever. Yes. Wow. So that's an interesting story. But when Advita approached me, she said she was a fangirl, which is really weird. But it was, what she said to me was, it was really great seeing a leader like her in the profession. And I've, growing up in the profession, growing up in my professional association, it's not unusual to be the only person of color around, at volunteer tables within the profession, within my teams. What's been interesting is, as a consultant, I still to this day am sitting around executive tables, HR tables, communication tables, and I'm usually the only diverse individual. And I use diverse. I grew up in Canada, so I'm very much a Canadian who has Indian heritage. So I think you spend a lot of time figuring out who you are. What's been really interesting with a leader like me, which started during the pandemic, because of the similar stories Advita and I had and the experiences we had, that said, we need to kind of stand up and step up and inspire others. We were thinking communications has become bigger than that because of all the conversations that have changed in the world. It really was, we need to kind of step up so others can see leaders like them and be inspired to come into our profession and do the work they need to do. What's been exciting recently is that love of internal communication engagement has mixed in with the DEI, and even my work with inner strength communication, which is my day job, I always call, with the work with inner strength communication, which is my agency, has kind of moved into the DEI space. So a lot of the philosophies that we're talking about today, that movement from just performative to real performance, is near and dear to my heart, whatever we're talking about, whether we're talking about culture and values and strategies, but really important is when we start talking diversity as well.
Well, I'm inspired already. And I think the hardest job today is going to be keeping us to time, because I've got this feeling that we could go off on random tangents left, right and centre. But I know Advita really well, and what she brings in terms of her energy and passion and courage and all of those words that you describe around Advita kind of completely makes sense to me. But I can't believe you've only met her for 20 minutes. That's crazy.
Well, the pandemic had a little to do with that. I'm sure if I was able to travel, it would be different.
Absolutely. So just let's bring it back to the definition. So we recently co-produced a great piece of content called 4 Steps to Build an Inclusive Culture. And within that, we don't just talk about diversity and inclusion. We talk about EDIB, equality, diversity and inclusion and belonging. Why is it so important to include all 4 elements when we're describing this? Well, Priya?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me that they're actually slightly different things. So I begin with equality and look at it in a view of fairness and almost basic human rights. So, almost having those basic principles like Maslow's hierarchy, those safety elements. Diversity for me is all about thinking about what we all bring to the table. We are all wonderfully different and unique. So it's about making sure that we acknowledge that and see that see our differences. But then the tailor side of that is that inclusion is all about creating environments where everyone can be diverse, but bring themselves to be loud and proud in the environments that you have. And then I think the output of that is belonging. Only by having the right elements of equality, diversity and inclusivity can you actually create a culture where people feel that they can belong and be who they really are.
And I think we don't want to forget that so much of this is linked to the conversation around wellness as well, mental health, that when we feel safe, when we feel secure in our workplace, in our homes, in our schools, in our communities, what we're able to give back is bigger. Yeah. And we're able to be a functioning and contributing individual in that space in a way that is extremely different and empowering than if that didn't exist.
I Love that. And I think when we said at the beginning that, you know, it's never been more important, I think the headlines that we see just really bring this to life. I mean, you just log in every morning and there's a new headline up there. And I think, you know, the one to the right today, I looked at this on LinkedIn last night, and it just really stood out to me as well, especially with what we're talking about today. We're talking about the importance of listening, and that every person's perspective is important, and it's never been more important to ask, to communicate, and to listen. And I think that's what we're really here today, but it's a problem shared. And I think, Mel, we've just done some research, haven't we, the state of employee engagement, and I just wondered if you could just take us through some of the findings from that as well.
Of course, no problem. So I think it segues really nicely into probably the conversations that we've already been having. But we did this piece of research called A State of Employee Engagement in August this year. And we had over 300 HR professionals and organisations contribute to this. So it's much wider than just a WorkBuzz clients, because we knew it would be skewed for those just focusing on engagement. So if we just look at things, one of the key items that came out of State of Employee Engagement was understanding what our top HR priorities are for leaders across this research piece. As you can imagine, with it being about employee engagement, the top reason was about improving employee engagement and that overall experience. But I think then you look at the other reasons within, and Priya, you mentioned employee wellness. I think that's absolutely critical. This psychological safety piece is something that we cannot ignore, and that's something that with COVID and the impact of what's happened over the last, let's say, year, it's been longer than a year now with COVID, but that impact on our well-being and what we prioritize is different, and it's shifted. Those expectations at work need to shift alongside it. The next piece around creating diverse and inclusive workforces. The murder of George Floyd was a complete catalyst, I think, for the world to wake up and see actually what we're doing isn't enough. And I think, Dawn, some of the news articles that you've even brought up from the last few days demonstrate it even further. We are still on a journey here. We are nowhere near having a truly inclusive and diverse culture globally, or even within the UK, in Canada, in subsets. And I think what's really important for HR is that they understand that these things that are happening across the globe and the way that it's impacting the way that employees and individuals think and feel about working is having a knock-on impact for them staying and being able to attract the right talent, keeping the right talent, their perceptions on, you know, whether I'm going to join that business in the future. So I think it all comes really nicely hand in hand.
Probably explains why the ebook that we have created is probably one of our most downloaded pieces of content at the moment, but they all interlink, don't they? The employee experience is heavily connected to all of those things, and that sense of belonging, that sense of feeling valued and appreciated, all of those things come together about, you know, being yourself at work.
And there's this, you know, the conversation we're having around the great resignation, war on talent, like all of those things are really coming to a forefront in a way that leaders are starting to pay attention. And we have that opportunity to link what we do from a people perspective to those results that leaders are looking for, because they're going to feel it. And I feel that 2021 has been a year to prepare for it. And if you're not preparing, you're going to be reacting. And when you're reacting, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss the opportunity. And I think that it's always harder to go from further back. It's better to get ahead and plan what you need to do to address these issues.
Which is a beautiful segue into
there you go.
The next slide.
I planned it that way.
Thank you, Priya. Which is around kind of a model that we've created, which almost looks at where you are on that journey when it comes to equality, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So, like we said, often it's knowing where to start. At the end of this, and as a follow-up, we're going to actually provide a crib sheet, which breaks this down and will allow you to think about where you are on this journey. But to help with that, Mel, do you want to just talk through the different stages?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for launching the poll as well. If it just helps to see where everybody is on these stages. So if you're in learning, planning, acting, realizing, the way that this model works is very much as a continuous improvement model. We should never see our journey to become inclusive cultures as completed. They will never be completed because more and more groups will identify, we'll always have something else to improve. So we should look at this model as a cycle that to keep following. But the way that we view it is almost that you should start by learning. Only by learning can you understand where you're coming from and what your starting point is, that baseline, so that you know where you can launch to. And then after you've learned about the diversity data and how your people perceive how inclusive you are as an organization, or even as an individual, if you want to learn more about yourself, other groups that exist, make yourself more conscious of your own unconscious biases and things that are critical for. By learning, that's how you will do that. Then once you've learned, you can put that knowledge into a plan. So planning, agreeing, aligning how you're going to take it forward and what success looks like in terms of that plan. Once you've got that plan, put it into action. So act, do what you said you would. If you're doing this at an organizational level, it's really important. And you'll hear Dawn and I always talk about employee voice because this is what we do in our day-to-day jobs, but let them get involved, drive that change, but also have a voice in steering it. And if something's not hitting well, change it, adapt and revisit your learning. It's really important with the learn stages. It's like you can re-dip into that at any point. If you're not comfortable with the decisions that you're making or it's feeling uncomfortable, go back and learn. It's really important that you can move in and out of that section. And then the final part, once you've acted, hopefully you will start to realize and see the fruits of your labor. So you'll see the shift around your culture becoming more inclusive and use data and feedback to prove that shift. And then the joy is with the continuous improvement model, it's all about starting again and re-reviewing where you can go from there. So hopefully with the poll, we'll see where people are. Oh, interesting. And what we can see, I think we can share, these results have been shared with everybody that's online. But you can see 64% said that you're learning, 29% planning, and 7% said realize. So there's one of you that is already kind of through the cycle, but hopefully will re-enter learning shortly. But great that you've almost gone through that whole loop. What I would say is this is really interesting compared with some other data points that we've done in state of engagement that will come to life later. But it's fantastic to see how many of you are off those starting blocks already, like Priya had said. It's almost like you've got to start somewhere. So good to see so many people learning.
And in your world, Priya, kind of having a model like this, how important is that?
I think it's a little bit of, I'm a gold quill judge for IABC, and it really is about really doing your research and having the plan and being very purposeful around the process. And I think that's where we're getting stuck with a lot of organizations, that they're hoping that by doing a little bit of training and doing a little bit here and there, telling the stories, that it's enough to actually drive change. And the conversations I've had with some of the clients that I've been working with here in Canada, some very large employers, some government departments who are trying to make real change from a diversity perspective, they realize the plan is not enough. So I have seen a lot of organizations do the learning and say, here's the plan, this is what we want. But until they get those employees engaged, until they start impacting the behavior, the everyday behavior, but also the decisions that are made on a regular basis, that we really can't drive the ultimate change that we're looking for. So you're seeing a lot of organizations get stuck, if you will. They feel like they're doing enough, but they're not seeing the results come up. You're not seeing a change at the higher levels in the organizations. You're not seeing a change in the recruiting. So then they'll start talking about the pipeline. But during one of our conferences, what we've been hearing is, you can't blame the pipeline. When you're fixing a pipeline, you need to actually figure out where it's stuck.
Yeah.
You actually have to figure out what's causing that break and that block. And that's what we need to do, because it's not superficial changes. It really is the deep everyday changes that have what organizations need to do, but how individuals need to act and decide in the moment as well.
Yeah. And I think we're going to come on in a little bit just to talk about some best practices that we've seen out there, some great stories of organizations that are seeing successes through the different stages of this journey. But just moving on, Mel, did you have anything to add on that bit?
No, that's fine.
I think if we move on, then, why this is so important, and how it links to where you are on that journey. So I think it was 64% of you said that you were in that learn stage. And Mel, do you want to just bring this to the slide to life from the State of Employee Engagement research that we did?
Yeah, sure. So I think what we've done is be able to map where people are on their stages of that cycle, that continuous improvement cycle in terms of EDIB, and then map if their engagement levels increased, did they stay the same, did they decline, or don't you know? But what you can hopefully see in terms of this graph is it demonstrates that the further you are with your EDIB journey, the more likely you are to have improved or sustained employee engagement. And very pertinent and to this point is if you've done nothing, you're much more likely to have declined in terms of that employee engagement. It's that, and I think that also almost links back into learn as well. The difficulty with learn is sometimes that it's not visible to people. So when it comes to employee engagement and those levels being able to rise or sustain, learn has a limited impact if you're not directly contacting people to learn from them. So that's where I would say the further that you go with the journey, that's where you'll see continued improvement around increasing engagement. So critical thing is just get off the blocks, start talking to people and telling them that you're doing something, because doing nothing is the worst thing you could be doing right now.
And the data has been consistent, right? The data has been consistent across the board, where increased diversity means increased innovation, better business results. That data has been communicated for the last 20, 30 years, right? But we keep asking, we keep being in a state where we're asking for more proof. And I think when you're there, when the data has been so consistent over a long time, you need to ask yourself why you want to continue keeping the systems alive that exist today.
Yeah.
And chances are it's because it works for you, right? Let's be honest. It's because the privilege you have in those systems actually work for you. So you're not really, you don't have any skin in the game. But it's going to hurt it. The data says it hurts your business.
Yeah. And if anyone is kind of working on this and, trying to get that message across internally within their organizations, then in the ebook that we send afterwards, then it has got some of the stats that Priya mentioned in there, and that linkage between kind of inclusive cultures and business performance. So there's some really powerful research in there to support any conversations that you might be having. But I think this for us was the staggering 1 in 5 haven't even started their EDIB journey. So does this surprise you both?
No.
Yeah, so go on, Priya, you go first.
No, I was saying it doesn't surprise me. I mean, let's be honest, there's been a lot going on in the last few years. There are some companies out there who are simply trying to stay afloat. There are companies that are trying to re-strategize. There's things that, it's really awesome. I love talking to executives and seeing where their heads are at. And I think what we're seeing is those organizations that are global in nature, that have values that include things like respect and diversity, a lot of them do, inclusion, are starting to say, who are we and how do we behave? How do we deliver in a space when this conversation is going on? How do we protect our reputation? How do we get recognition for the work that we are doing? So there's some great conversations that are going on, but but then it's what do we do about it? And I think that we need to get to that point and then say we need to be very purposeful behind the effort. And I think that's what you say through all of the research that you've done as well.
Mel?
Definitely. And I found it actually probably more surprising than Priya, and probably I found it quite disappointing actually, seeing 1 in 5 not doing anything. I think this is maybe my virtuous millennial little brain.
Yeah, probably.
And also to be honest, I what it reminds me of is almost my own biases, as in I work in this space. I am a Western woman that is very much behind this. The people that I interact with and that I see on a day-to-day are operating in a good inclusive space, but it really demonstrates to me how far we have in terms of the journey. And I know I actually ran this poll at Accountex, so that was accounting and finance professionals last week, and a lot of them were based in India. but the shift wasn't a fifth of them hadn't started, it was a third. And I just thought, oh gosh, again, it reminded me of my own biases and made me think actually what we need to do is be reminding ourselves that not everything is as great as it can seem sometimes, and you have to really keep looking at those areas where you need to advocate more. We need to be better allies to people in certain areas, and again, we just look at the headlines that have come through over the last week, and it's so clear that so much is wrong at an institutional and societal level that it will take a lot of time to break it and fix it.
And I feel like it's interesting you brought up generations there, Mel, but I've got an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old, and we are not prepared for what's coming. Right. I get, as an Indian woman, I've got mixed children, and they call me on things at the dinner table every single day. So it's, when they enter the workplace, their expectations are, and maybe I'm talking from a Canadian perspective, but even if you look at TikTok, even if you look at the conversations they're having and the causes they're getting involved in, their expectations are so high. And they really care about purpose-driven organizations. Like, we as an organization, as society, as leaders, have to get ready for what's coming. They're entering the workplace in the next few years.
Yeah, my 13-year-old had a look of horror on her face. We were chatting in the car this morning about what I was doing at work today, and I was saying I was doing this webinar. She was like, "Why is that even a thing?"
Yes.
That was a simple
reality that they live in. Yeah.
Why are people talking about this? People should just be accepted for who they are. That's a given.
Yeah.
So they're going to have a shock if things don't change in terms of entering the workforce, and that makes me sad.
I think it's more that the leaders will have a shock. We'll find ourselves with boards that go, why aren't anybody joining us? Why can't we attract talent?
And then the number of organizations that are young people who are just building it themselves. This is the generation that's coming. The younger millennials and the Gen Z are just simply building it themselves, and they know how. Yeah. So they're creating the organizations they want to work for.
There you go. So let's try and weave in some stories that you guys have experienced through the different stages of the model. I think, Mel, you, if we start with the learn phase, how do you help clients and organizations at the beginning of that journey in terms of capturing the data side of things?
Yeah, no, thanks, Dawn. I think it's a great question, and one that we're in constant conversations with our clients about the best way of doing this. But for me, it's almost twofold. There's the first element around a diversity data capture. Only by kind of knowing the shape of your organization, how many males, females do you have, what, or in terms of gender identity, in terms of sexual identity, in terms of race identity, nationality, perhaps disability, only by knowing your spread of employees do you understand how representative you are of your future talent pool, like we're talking about, or even your clients that you're currently operating with. So I think that's the first place to look and do that data capture. And some organizations are fantastic at capturing this from the as soon as an employee joins, and that's the best way of doing it if you can be upfront. But if you haven't, it's not all doom and gloom. It can be done with retrospect, but what's really important is telling employees why it matters to you and why you're looking at things at this point in time. And I think coupled with the diversity data for me is around looking at their feedback about their experience. So this is kind of certain questions we ask in engagement surveys are about your feelings around fair treatment, your feelings about belonging, using your voice. And again, by slicing and dicing data in a myriad of ways, you can identify groups that feel more able to do that or less able to do that. So you can create your personas as to where you need to focus your time, where you need to attract more talent, and you can see where your weaknesses are as an organization to up those numbers and actually proactively attack that.
Yeah, and I think we at WorkBuzz, we talk about intent a lot, don't we? We need to set the intention right. If you are doing that retrospectively, it's about why, and it's about improving culture, it's about making things better. And if you set that intent right, it changes the conversation.
And ultimately, the actions speak louder than the words, because most of the organizations I work with here in North America who are trying to start collecting self-identification data are really struggling with it because there's a lack of trust. And that's a cultural issue that needs to be fixed.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And Priya, if we move on to the plan stage, I know you've had some positive experiences that you shared in the ebook with Tarmac. Do you want to just bring that to life a little bit?
Oh, I think it was in the ebook. It was one of our Leader Like Me members who really worked with Tarmac on, and I think she's still there, talking about the programs that she created around belonging. And again, very purposeful programs that created that sense of belonging. It was all. Now I'm trying to remember what it was exactly, but it was Proud to Be Me. I think that was the campaign she talked about. That was a huge success, and it really brought everyone's pride to the table. The conversations that everyone brings something different, everyone brings different experiences, and we're a place that values those experiences. And it was just a really great campaign. I've worked with organizations as well that really create plans around infrastructure and operational changes, from a recruitment, from an entire employee life cycle perspective, right? From recruitment to orientation to recognition programs, talent management, performance management, and then even exit interviews, and really takes a look at what does it look like? What do we look like? How do we compare? What does good look like for us? Where do we need to step? So where do we want to be in the next 5 years? So I really like that it's very purposeful, and it starts with your goals, and then also articulates what good looks like, what measurement looks like on a timeline that gives you those smart objectives.
You just reminded me of a really powerful campaign that Accenture did as well. And if you Google it on YouTube, they did an amazingly moving campaign involving their employees around belonging and inclusion. So Google that and grab a tissue because it'll make you cry. If we move into the act stage, Mel, I know you've done some work with Premier Foods. Did you want to bring that to life a little bit?
Yeah, to be fair, they've also done a video. I should mention Premier Foods will be upset with me if I don't mention that. That I found on LinkedIn, and it's so powerful. These and they're real people sharing their real experiences, and there's nothing quite like those videos. So we'll make sure that we get that in the link resources as well. I'll dig it out. But yeah, Premier Foods is a brilliant organization. So a lot of you will probably recognize their brands more so the likes of Mr. Kipling, which I'm a big fan of, and a staple host of brands that you'll see in supermarkets at Premier Foods. So they work in food manufacturing, and something that they brought to life was almost their executive team and sharing, look, that it doesn't necessarily look as representative in our executive team as it does further down our organization. There's a clear gap with female progression up into the echelons of top tiers. But what they did was really lean into it, and as an exec team, very much backed learning more about their gender gaps by running what we'd call a gender diagnostic that enabled them to have very clear conversations about areas of the business where there was a gender imbalance around certain elements, and be able to focus on what they could change and what they could control and influence. So a key finding is, as an example, especially when we're talking about female progression, was they were able to find that females were less likely than their male counterparts to speak up in front of senior audiences. So quite quickly, by learning that about yourself, you can put a plan in action and act on it, which was around offering them gravitas training about how to hold a room and speak to those audiences. They also did like a myriad of things like reverse mentoring, so enabling them to have better relationships with those audiences. Just demonstrates almost by how powerful it is to listen, look at yourself in the mirror, and actually lean into the challenge that you have. And I think they're a great organization that have really made change by just focusing on that. And again, they're very conscious that that's one element of inclusivity. So how do we continue along that journey and keep learning about themselves and planning around that?
And I love that, because that's kind of, you know, we talk about what the organizations need to do. One of the reasons a leader like me was created was there is a role that needs to be played by the individuals who want to take advantage of those opportunities. And what we were seeing in the conversations we were hearing with women of color, we'd like to expand to other groups, but it's taking time. We're very young, but it's with women of color in particular, was that they were afraid. They didn't feel they were being heard. They were afraid to speak up. They were afraid to present their thoughts, and didn't know how to influence, or were used to being in the background. So that's the whole, a leader like me was about building courage and confidence, and helping them really, negotiation skills, influencing skills, all of those things, getting rid of imposter syndrome. So we have very open conversations in a safe space, because sometimes it's hard to have those conversations in your workplace where you feel like you're being judged. So taking them out of the workplace and having a group of people like them that they can talk and relate to and talk about what they're afraid of. It's been really interesting, and the progress we've seen by these women, because they're playing their role too, or we're coaching them on how to approach HR on an issue, or approach their leader. And in most of those cases, some of the cases they say, this is not going to work, this is a people issue. In most of those cases, it really is a conversation that's opened up with their leader or their HR leader, where they said, I didn't know. And then they're able to work on a solution, because they're in a different place and the leader is now aware of the challenges that exist. So we're really excited by those stories where we've given them the preparation to step up to the opportunities that are there.
And that's a really great example of that realize phase as well, isn't it? So, and I think the power is in its simplicity, isn't it? It's just surrounding people, surrounding each other with people that you can relate to and have got shared experiences.
Yeah. And when you're checking those boxes, think of those individuals who are walking into those rooms and those executive tables who are by themselves. If they don't have that confidence, if they don't feel like they've got some invisible support group behind them, it's really hard to do.
True. Have to have each other's backs.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Anything more to add in terms of stories on this model? Because actually we're nicely coming to kind of towards the end. I can't quite believe it's gone so fast, but we've actually come to the summary bit, which is really nice timing, because hopefully what we've shared today, as we said, is a really simple model to help understand where you are on the journey, or if you're not on that journey yet, where to get started. So we'll share that with you afterwards. We really recommend downloading that ebook and having a work through it. And there's a combination of stories and best practices, both from WorkBuzz and a leader like me, that can really help you and, you know, almost be that safe space for you as well. Number two really is just around that. It's about creating that safe space within your organizations where people can speak openly about their experiences and ask questions. But there's always more to learn. I think Mel brought that to life really well. We need to keep monitoring its continuous improvement, and we need to keep reinforming those plans so we're there constantly kind of at the forefront of it. And I think the most important thing is that every journey is unique. Every organization is different. And I think what this comes down to is that we're all different. Every one of us brings our own unique strengths and, you know, abilities to the organizations that we work within. But most importantly, it's about doing what feels right for you and your organization. So I think those are the four key takeaways that we want you to go away with today. Priya, do you just want to spend a couple of minutes just talking about some of the programs that a leader like me are offering?
Absolutely. So we talked about our flight program, and that's the one I was referring to. It's a, you know, self-paced modules where we do group coaching with women of color. There's a community that they belong to, and they get monthly insight sessions as well as part of a 1-year membership that provides them with that safe space and support. And it's really great to hear the conversations and the questions they ask, the support they get, the vulnerability and the authenticity that's in that community, and the realization, as you talk about, of them taking that feedback, taking the learnings and being able to apply them to contribute to their organization. So if you do have women of color in your organization, take a look at a leader like me. It's we keep it cost effective, because right now most of these women are paying for it on their own. You know, and that's the thing that, and I think about, if they're paying for it on their own, they're making a move to move out of your organization. I will guarantee you that. Yeah. Whereas I've noticed that those that, like, you know, Tarmac is what might be one of those examples where if the organization paid for it, there's a consensus, a commitment to that organization because that individual feels supported by it. We're also launching a few new programs. So we're launching the Wings program. It's exclusively for DEI practitioners. You say EDIB, we say DEI or DNI here in Canada. And it really, what we're noticing is the conversations we're having with internal communication and HR professionals who around the world who are on their own, given the mandate for their diversity, inclusion, equity mandate. And they may have resources, they may not, but they just feel unsupported again. And they're kind of navigating this space where everybody's put up a shingle and they don't know who's credible. So we're going to create a community. We're starting with 10 with a 6-month cohort to test the program out. It'll be monthly insight sessions with DEI thought leaders that we've discovered out there who are doing some really innovative things, group coaching and one-on-ones as well, coaching, so that you can have someone to talk to throughout, because DEI is not one size fits all. We want to make sure you're hearing from various leaders and being supported by a group of colleagues and peers. And then we're launching a podcast. Advita, I kept saying no. I had no desire to launch a podcast, but Advita's finally talked me into it. So January 2022, we want to keep the diversity, the bigger diversity conversation alive. We're going to be talking about weekly trends in DEI globally, and we're going to bring in a guest on a regular basis, diverse leaders who are making a difference, innovative DEI thought leaders who you need to hear from, and interviews with a Leader Like Me members as well. There's sponsorship available for that, but I think what'll be exciting is that there'll be that weekly podcast for you to hear what are people talking about, and we're trying to keep it to a 20 or 30-minute format, not too long. So hopefully you'll take a look at us and join us on whatever your favorite podcast station is.
That's good. And did Advita get you to read the Shonda Rhimes book, The Year of
She
Yes?
did. She's very influential.
Me too.
What a great book.
It's
but
so
it really is. And I think we say that it's time to say yes to ourselves. Right.
Yes.
And there's so much opportunity, because I think when you create empowered people in your organizations on anything you're dealing with, you know, it's magic to see an organization. You can feel it. Like I can feel it as a consultant, not even online. I have to tell you, better when you're in person. But when I walk into a building and walk into a room, I can feel that culture as soon as I walk in. I know when I can feel anger, I feel, you know, concern, I feel anxiety, I feel excitement. And I've had the pleasure of working for some wonderful organizations when I was in-house for 20 years. And so that's what's possible. I want everyone who works for an organization to feel like they can do their best, because we spend a lot more time with our work colleagues sometimes than we do with our families, right?
Yeah.
And then from a WorkBuzz perspective, if we can support you at an organizational level, then myself and Mel would be more than happy to jump on a 30-minute call with you just to share our experiences and talk through kind of some of those challenges and how we might be able to help you. But as a follow-up, as we said, we'll be sharing the 4 steps to building an inclusive culture ebook, a crib sheet to get you thinking about where you are on that journey, plus the webinar recording. But if you're interested in finding out more, you've seen our websites, you can email us at hello@workbuzz.com, or you can email Priya on her email address here. But thank you so much for your time. We have kept to time, which is a miracle. But Priya, Mel, it's been fabulous. I've really enjoyed this. And I think next time we do one, we'll need about 3 hours. But I think we did well within our 45-minute slot.
There you go.
Thank you. Let's be magic makers and go forth and conquer.
Brilliant.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.